Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening to everyone. I know people are joining, I think, from all over the globe today. I'm Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer for Orthogonal. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We know you have very busy schedules, but we're going to try and give you a good 4 hours of content in the next 1 hour as we discuss cloud native architectures for MedTech and why cloud native is actually a very good thing for MedTech. Um, We've got some terrific panelists here today. For those of you who haven't joined before, we do these about once a month and try and bring in experts from medical device manufacturers and related companies, as well as our own internal experts to discuss sort of pressing issues and important things that can help all of us accelerate medical device software development faster. A couple quick things before we get going. We really value your brutally candid feedback on this webinar and on ideas you have for the future. So if we reach out to you, um, please call or answer our email because we want to know how we did and what we can do to create webinars with more value in the future. Uh, Second, and very briefly, we didn't used to do this, but people told us it wasn't obvious at the end of the webinar that you would just intuitively know who we are at Orthogonal or why we're doing these webinars. So I'm going to hand things over for a minute to Bernard Kappa, our founder and CEO, who's going to give you a little bit of background on who is Orthogonal and why we're doing this before we get into the meat of the webinar.
Thanks, Randy. So a little bit about orthogonal, right? We believe in improving patient outcomes faster. We're all about applying what we think of as fast feedback loop best practices to quality processes, development processes for SAMD and connected device ecosystems. And we're always building better processes, tools, and patterns that help our customers move faster and break nothing. So we do everything from mobile, cloud, AI, ML, Bluetooth, ISO 1345 certified quality management system, everything from active implantables to pure cloud SAMD. And we work with customers ranging from venture-backed startups to enterprise medical device companies. Some work in the pharma space, and then also non-traditional companies that have medical device functionality like Google and Bose and Aura. We engage with people in a couple of different ways. We will build systems and subsystems for them. We will co-build with them, typically bringing our expertise in, and we will also enable people to build out their own digital factories and digital ecosystems with our expertise. We kind of think of this as, there are lots of different regulatory and quality practices and lots of different software development practices. There's a sweet spot where you can be much more efficient, move much, much faster of practices that really work very well together in the medical device space. And so that leads us to this webinar. We think of some of the sort of core building blocks around agile methodologies, not just in the development process, but sort of extending fast feedback loops through more of the product life cycle and the organization, thinking about non monolithic modular cloud native architecture, borrowing practices from folks like AWS and Microsoft and Google, digital ecosystem design controls. All of these digital ecosystems have data that is generated and captured through that. So what your strategy is around that and the AI factory to harness that data, inject it back in to create value within your system, and tooling and testing as well as AI in the life cycle. So that is what we do. If you're interested in that, either as for us to develop something or to teach you some of our tricks, happy to talk to you guys about it. I'll turn it back over to you, Randy.
Great. Thanks, Bernhard. So our other two guest panelists today are people I'm thrilled to have here. They're top of our list when we decided to do a webinar on this topic. We've worked with both of them and professional contexts and standard setting contexts. We've had them on webinars and done talks with them, and they really know their stuff. So I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there. Let's start with Cab Maddox. Cab, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Randy. Hi, everyone. Cab Maddox. Super happy to be here. I am Senior Director of Software Engineering in the AI and Computational Biology group at Cepheid, which is a Danaher operating company. Most of my career has been in healthcare provider facing cloud native software development. Uh, Prior to Cepheid, I was at a Boston biotech diagnostic development company called Day Zero Diagnostics, working on development of an genomics-based in vitro diagnostic. And so, yeah, had an opportunity to work some with this group, which was great, and have more recently transitioned to Cepheid, working on infectious disease diagnostics and kind of future next generation diagnostics for that group. So happy to be here.
Right. And I think you actually originally have a degree in chemistry, right?
I do, yeah. Originally degree in chemistry, and so yeah, have been able to leverage bits and pieces of that in kind of building my engineering career, and especially around the genomics work, which has been nice.
Okay. Since you guys were proposing hazing me on this conference, I invite everybody to submit your chemistry pop quiz questions to Cab in the chat along the
Yeah,
way.
those will go unanswered for sure.
And Ian Sutcliffe, longtime collaborator in front of Orthogonal as well. Ian,
Yeah,
welcome. Who are you?
thanks. Great to be here. It's always fun. Yeah, Ian Sutcliffe. I'm a principal solutions architect, stroke tech strategist, stroke industry specialist. So I'm a techie at heart. I've spent my career within the life science industry supporting both pharma and med tech companies. Most recently at AWS, where I primarily supported, I think, 19 of the top 20 farmers, a lot of the biggest MedTech providers, but also, mid-size and startups. They're sometimes even more fun. So um, usually anything that is to do with regulatory or MedTech, I get involved in conversations.
Very good. Ian also has a fascinating piece of trivia on this because he's been a extremely active contributor to AMI TIR 115 we've been working on, which is basically the guidance for cloud computing usage underneath enabling a medical device. Ian's father worked on the standard that evolved into ISO 9001. So I've met people, who have gone into all kinds of businesses behind their parents, but I think standards is a new one.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, it's BS 5750, which ultimately became 9001. And my dad's retired, and he's still actively involved in the ISO community. So yeah, I learned all around about quality management, total quality management, just through osmosis, just being around. It was never my career aspiration, but it just kind of seeps in through the pores, I think.
You brought him to take your dad to work today and you left and said, I'm going to be a quality person.
That wasn't my
Uh,
intent, but
Very good. Okay, so let's dive into this discussion. We welcome all of you. We got some questions in advance that I'll be dropping in throughout, but please give us your questions as they come up now, and we'll try and integrate them into the discussion. So I don't know that we need to give everybody a 101 primer on what is the cloud, but why is cloud native inherently a good thing for MedTech? Why is this a webinar even worth doing? Is this just another computer somewhere else, or is there a new way of thinking here?
I'll go last, but I'll let you guys start with that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I can start off. I mean, I think that the thinking about cloud native architectures, leveraging the cloud, especially in like uh, medical device space, um, you are first and foremost, as a lot of folks are thinking about, moving to the cloud, you're offsetting obviously to world-class, best-in-class IT support. So no matter kind of what level of engagement with the cloud you're taking on, you get that kind of best in class enterprise IT. You take the kind of on-prem hardware maintenance off of your plate. I think the thing that uh, becomes interesting is as you think about the layers of cloud service infrastructure that you can take on, especially from a larger medical device company, you have an opportunity to work your way up to share more and more of the responsibility with public cloud providers that are doing this at the highest level. And so uh, I think as for us as we're and the decisions between startups and larger medical device companies and the approach is definitely different. But first and foremost, it gives you uh, a set of patterns, practices, and a shared responsibility that immediately kind of moves the needle on yeah, opening up opportunities for you to move quickly.
Yeah, I'd build on that. I mean, it's taking a lot of the heavy lifting off your shoulders. It's allowing you, it's giving you very quick access to the latest technologies. To Cab's point, I mean, the cloud providers are used to operating at a huge scale. The data center operations are second to none. The resilience of their services are, far higher than most people could build on-prem. I mean, take a simple service like S3. You go store an object, the data file on S3, it's replicated at least across 3 data centers for free. It's under the hood. So that's why you get like 11 nines resilience from S3, and you're getting that out of the box. You don't have to build it. If I was thinking of trying to build that capability myself, it would be astronomically expensive and take a long time. So you're getting a lot of benefits, beyond just, managed services where you're offloading, mandatory, very little value add tasks like database maintenance, upgrading your DB engine or OS patching. These kinds of things are taken on for you. So you can start to reallocate your resources to more value add activity.
Yeah, that's right. You can really it gives you an opportunity to focus on your domain, which is
What's
yeah,
important?
where you need to spend your time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, again, building on that, a lot of what we end up working on, right, is um, relatively complex medical device ecosystems, right? If you have, I don't know, an insulin pump connected to a CGM, and potentially third-party services for weaving those together, providing information to patients, maybe bringing, I don't know, an Aura ring in for sleep data and all of those types of things. And your value that you as a medical device company are creating is not purely in a device or a sensor, but it is in a system that fits in with people's lifestyles, with the needs of clinicians, etc. You're building a complex ecosystem where there are a lot of moving parts. Those moving parts are potentially subsystems that you're developing. If you've got 200 people in your digital organization building different things, you can't sort of think about that monolithically. Similarly, you all the things that you are depending on and working with, whether that's operating systems, cloud infrastructure, integrations to other third parties, are also not things that are fully in your control. Um, and there is a kind of traditional monolithic architecture that we have seen and way of organizing medical device software that really doesn't work for those types of ecosystems, right? It's the kind of thing that um, again, slows you down. It's brittle. If you try to scale, you end up adding more people and getting less done when you have this kind of monolithic architecture. Um, if you look at what is happening inside a company like Amazon or Microsoft, uh, that is not the problem that they have, right? They are moving much, much more quickly. Um, and while you may not have to have all the scale that they have for new services that all work together with each other, there is a lot that you can learn from that and adapt and apply. In addition to sort of leveraging their services, so you're only doing a smaller part on top of that, there are lessons to be learned from them that you can apply to how you architect your software and your systems, and how you organize the different teams working on those things. So to me, that's the real uh, promise, especially in if you're doing digital product development.
And that aligns with kind of regulatory guidance. I mean, the agencies are always looking for you to, adopt standards, adopt industry best practices, especially IT practices. So you can leverage things like well-architected frameworks, which is effectively the best practices as defined by the cloud providers. It's not a standard per se, but follow those industry best practices. You can, really create some resilient, performant architectures.
So are you implying or saying that there's nothing completely unique about MedTech that says, no, 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 we need to do it differently because we're MedTech and we're regulated by X or bound by Y, or because we have human lives at stake and Netflix doesn't?
There's a different perception. So I mean, the industry is very risk averse. I mean, if something goes wrong, it can have a significantly bigger impact on patient health than if your movie stops playing in the middle of the of the night. So there is, and the regulatory agencies are focused on that. As your own motto says, move fast, break nothing. Break nothing being the I think the predominant thing here. So how do you build on public cloud and not break anything? I mean, so as we were saying, you've got kind of the operational excellence, you've got the resilience in the architecture, you've got the scale, which all contributes, I believe, towards creating a much more robust architecture. We've had distributed architectures in med device space for years now. They were primarily on-prem. So the question is, can you operate your on-prem infrastructure better than the big cloud providers? Yes or no? I would say, from my personal experience working in the industry, probably not. We're just not operating at that level of scale. So there's those advantages from the experience and the scale and the abilities of the cloud providers that I think take you in the right direction for medical devices from a resiliency, from a performance, from an availability perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think to add to that, I mean, if you are a um, medical device company, you have even just culture that is going to be different from um, folks that are not in medical device development. And that culture is driven by, yeah, the regulatory requirements you have and how those drive some of the, cross-functional engagement that your engineering team has to have, or some level of your engineering team has to have, and the amount of obviously evidence that has to be produced as part of your development and architecting process. But at the end of the day, medical device companies are building software that needs to work to the for the to the requirements it was developed for, and there has to be some evidence that that software works as expected. And whether, there are patterns of doing that successfully outside of, as Ian mentioned, enormous scale, moving extremely quickly through thoughtful, like cloud native architecture with not patient safety risk, but other risks that are significant, that are driving that development. And so I think in my opinion, for medical device companies, it's a lot of it is culture, maybe culture and adjustment of culture and thinking about, you know, there's like best practice architecture in the cloud, and for many existing companies in the medical device space probably have further to go to get there than companies that have not been in the medical device space. And it's not going to be possible to make a single jump. And so figuring out, understanding where those where the target is, what the best, what's our best kind of architecture for being in a cloud environment, and making sure you don't stop at like the lift and shift model. You don't, it's a very valid migration path to, you know, take a monolithic architecture and put it on an EC2 instance, and you get some benefits and some additional risks from that. Move it onto an AWS EC2 instance, but not stopping there. Thinking about, okay, how can you start to strangle out services from this monolithic software into an architecture that is more appropriate and more aligned with these other organizations that are outside of medical device development, that really leverages the opportunities you have in the cloud.
So
Now, I'd build on just two
Go ahead.
small points. So culture to me is huge in this space. Unfortunately, what I encounter with all the customers that I deal with is often I will encounter a culture of compliance over a culture of quality. So their approach to IT is proving to regulators that they're doing what they're supposed to do. Whereas I always contend, if you strive for a culture of quality, that compliance will be a natural byproduct. You look at any, top performing engineering team, even outside of MedTech, odds are they would be regulatory compliant if an agency looked at them because they're following those best practices. So I think culture is key. If you're going to do this, focus on that culture of quality, which the FDA is all over. They've been asking that for years. And then the other point was to Cap's point is, that whole starting with lift and shift. I think it's perfectly valid because there's a certain risk going immediately to cloud native. It's actually quite a good step to do lift and shift, get used to cloud, build the muscle, build the experience, the expertise in operating in cloud. Sometimes that's better than going straight for cloud native.
Hmm. It struck me, it was interesting, Ian. I remember when we were working on the AMETR 115 on cloud computing for medical devices. And initially, Randy, by the way, is co-chairing that committee. And initially, we had, again, medical device companies primarily in there, and we were constructing this is how it should work. And we came up with a way of looking at that, and it basically came down to, if the cloud vendors would just tell us what the changes are that they're making, then we can, know when to do what kind of validation. And I remember we had a meeting where Ian, you and your colleagues and other folks came together with the med device companies for the first time, and this was laid out. And I forget, I think it was you who said this, like, you don't understand what's actually happening under the hood. We can give you that, but you're not going to be able to do anything with it, right? Because ultimately there are thousands of changes that are happening uh, every day. It's probably more than that at this point,
Yeah.
right? Um, and that is all automated and has kind of safety features, rollbacks, everything built in so that you maintain resilience even when you have change. That's pretty powerful and really cool stuff, but also means that is that's a different paradigm than what medical device companies have been used to. What I'd love to sort of elaborate a little bit more on is, okay, what are those um, principles or patterns, right? And even no medical device company is going to build their own cloud services all the way down. Maybe some have tried in the past. What are the things that they can pull out from how that is done that can help them as they get more mature in their architecture?
Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. I mean, and I worked in MedTech, so I understand the perspective of those guys. Um, and I had that internal battle with our own IT engineering team. It's like, yes, we could tell you about every single change, but what are you going to do with that flood of changes, notifications? You can't possibly test the impact of every single one. So what I tried to do with them is let's bucket these changes. So there's deprecations. Okay, that's probably a big deal. So in that case, you do get notified, and it's usually something like 12 months in advance of any deprecation of service or feature. There's net new features. They're inherently low risk because, well, you're not using it yet. It's a new feature. And then you have all the others, what ITIL would probably refer to as standard changes. So these are low risk, very commonly recurring types of changes that happen under the hood and don't have any material impact on the service itself. And that impact is then tested. So I've worked in many software organizations, and I have never seen a pipeline like the AWS services pipeline. And you can look it up in their builder library. It's online. I mean, they don't just have dev, test, prod. They have alpha, beta, gamma, and then they release to just a few machines in one AZ. If that looks good, they'll expand it to the entire AZ and then the region, and then they'll do that in the next region. And it's this staged release process where they're testing continuously. And at any point in that pipeline, it can get rolled back. So it's an extremely robust change management and deployment pipeline, way more robust than I've seen working within medical device companies. So, again, it's that experience, it's that scale. I mean, everybody's fallible. We're not saying there will never be a problem, but then you start to get into the shared responsibility model around your architecture. So, I said S3 has 11 nines durability. EC2 has, I forget how many nines availability. But you can then increase that. If that's not suitable for your particular intended use, you can then load balance across AZs. You can have multi-region deployment. You can increase the robustness and resiliency of your own architecture by building out, following those cloud best practices to make sure that your implementation is more resilient than the individual services themselves.
I think that's right. And you have to look at what's the current state of your architecture and where can if you're thinking of moving to a cloud native architecture, where can you carve out interfaces and modularity within your system? And you get some benefits from that. You get some benefits from that in terms of also understanding the boundaries of your medical device. If you're moving from a monolithic system to a more modular system, you may be able to carve some things, in terms of risk, carve parts of the architecture fully out of the boundaries of your medical device. But even within boundary, you can, assign a blast radius for a specific component. If, you have to have a culture of like engineering and other cross-functional groups in your team as you move to that cloud native architecture, a culture of change. Like change is going to happen. It's what you do to take advantage of the benefits of that change and protect yourself against the risks associated with that change. And best practices architecture, medical device or not medical device, is designed to protect you against that changing world underneath you and put your team in a position where you can work productively on that, what is a more complex system. So I think looking at your architecture, starting to carve out the modular components and think about how the process, Ian mentioned, how the CI/CD processes, how kind of your development life cycle facilitates being able to move quickly, produce the evidence you need, and get the benefits of changes impacting a smaller blast radius of your full system. And that's a long-term migration because you've got the software itself has to change, and you have to change the processes around the software. So, but there is generally like an incremental approach is available.
Yeah. Although I will say a lot of what we've seen, right, especially, we work with companies that maybe have, built out incrementally over time, right? And haven't necessarily invested in kind of modernizing so much, right? And you can tell when it's like, okay, you're 8 years in to a particular architecture and you're scaling and you're adding people to and you're getting less value out of each additional person you're adding to your teams, and you're moving slower and each release is getting slower. There may be many reasons for that, but very often you probably don't have a very modular architecture that can handle, changes in lots of different parts of the system at the same time. It may be time to redesign the whole thing and from scratch. At some point, it is hard to incrementally make changes to a system like that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely you have to kind of weigh out the risks of like big bang changes versus incremental moves. And I think there has to be an investment on the engineering side and like getting to the understanding what the right architecture is, and investment around the engineering organization so that, other organizations are prepared to support, compliance, regulatory, other stakeholders in the system are ready to come along as well in terms of getting to rapid development. Because, like I said, otherwise you can get stuck in a quagmire of small incremental changes that actually there is a complexity trade-off. They're more complex systems when they're more modular.
Yeah.
So we've gotten a couple of questions in, which are different questions, but I think in many ways they all get back to some of the same core thing, which is this issue that in MedTech historically, I'll paraphrase in the language actually of our TIR, but in MedTech historically, we've gotten used to having a lot of control over everything that's in our medical device or that our medical device depends on. So this notion of somebody else is controlling not just a computer, but I'm subscribing to 3 dozen services and they're in turn using dozens of services. So how do you deal with things like risk management with loosely coupled architectures is one question. How do you recognize dependencies without creating hard traceability links? Another question, and we can kind of go through these, but I'll kind of create the family of questions, was how do you do an SBOM with all this? How do you assess cybersecurity risks in a changing environment when it's not your computer? How can you look your quality people or your regulatory people or your notified body or or your regulator in the face and with a straight eye saying, yeah, no, I've got this.
So I mean, we discussed this as part of the TIR as well, is breaking down that modular architecture, understanding which parts agencies are actually interested in. So, I mean, you could have software as a medical device running on cloud, connecting, or even a physical device connecting over IoT to a backend where it's storing data, and then you've got AI running over that. So you have regulations around the medical device itself. You've got MDDS in the middle. You've got new standards and regulations like 42001 around the AI. You got a data system at the back. There's lots of different regulations and standards at play on a single architecture. So breaking that down and establishing those compliance boundaries to know who's interested in what is I think one of the first steps.
I would say that I think you're right as far as that goes. I think you know you know what the FDA always says, and they said before TR working with us on the TR, et cetera. It's like use a risk-based approach, right? And so which is sort of a FDA get out of jail free card to some extent. It's like I don't know the answer, but use a risk-based approach. But I think that there is something to that, right? If you have a medical device that has dependencies on services, right? You want to obviously understand even if something is outside of the medical device, if there are failure modes for those services that end up being critical for you. They may not be part of the medical device, but they can have a big impact on that. Then you want to understand those failure modes, and you want to be able to monitor those, be able to detect when they happen, and then be able to take action to mitigate those, or at least alert, say, hey, we have an issue here. We can't do this particular thing, right? That is, if you look at things like the FDA's multiple function device guidance, that's somewhat of the paradigm there. If you look at the FDA's interoperability guidance, which, by the way, I think is very small and elegant compared to some of the other standards around interoperability, which are giant, unwieldy beasts. That is what's happening within that. You're sort of, when you're interoperating between medical devices, uh, this is about making the risks of failure transparent, and then allowing your interoperator to manage those risks on their side, right? So, to be a good citizen, that means sort of making that available and managing that as part of it. That's really a lot of certainly the kind of thing that you would do between different interoperators with two medical device companies, but you can apply it to the services underlying, or even within your digital ecosystem where, yes, it's all under your company's control except for the services underlying.
Mm.
um, the same thing helps there for you to manage your the different pieces of your ecosystem as they evolve, and allow you to evolve them uh, quickly without having this monolithic, oh, we can't release this because this and this, and you can only release software once a year because everything has to be in one connected system.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like, to build on that. I think the more traditional model of saying my goal is to have a monolithic, sealed off software product, and the focus is really on the risk. I want to like minimize the set of risks in my risk table, because the mitigations are expensive. It's a lot of effort to get changes in to mitigate those risks. And I think if you're thinking about folks that are building cloud native software, moving quickly, they aren't optimizing for minimizing the risks. They're optimizing for what are the mitigation, and they have strong patterns for rapid mitigations, because they're going to say, I'm going to have more risks. It's a complex system. I have new service providers. I get benefits from that. That gives me a better product if I have those integrations. I have to accept more risk about that. So I'm not going to focus on like take those services out to minimize my risks. I'm going to build on what is decades of development of companies around what are my rapid mitigation strategies, whether that's, progressive deployment strategies, or, strong CI/CD muscle. I think that it's a little bit of like mindset shift to say like change is happening, risks are going to be there, and my focus is on what are the strong patterns for mitigations? And there's really good material. There are really good patterns, folks at high scale that are doing this both in the medical device space, but definitely not in the medical device space, but with still like, either in finance or with regulatory requirements or with like critical business risk that they can't just do whatever they want to either, even if they're not in the medical device space. And so also maybe, yeah, knowing who your service providers are, what's their responsibility and what can you trust them on? And then how do you mitigate against uh, you know, if they fail to meet that responsibility, uh, is a little bit of a different strategy in terms of risk management.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that point more broadly that be, just because human lives aren't at risk doesn't mean that other organizations aren't extremely compelled to take risks seriously, even if they don't have to document it in a QMS or do a CAPA the way we do. And the metaphor I'll use for this, and Ian, you're ex-Amazon, so now I could say this with you on the webinar. But I'm going to give you the choice of two systems that you were in charge of that failed, and you can pick which one you want to be accountable for. One is a medical device, and now you can go sit in front of an FDA regulator in a conference room and explain how you got to the recall. The other one is you're in charge of the uptime for the Amazon.com shopping cart, and you can take the elevator up to Jeff Bezos' office and explain why it was down and nobody could purchase anything on Amazon.com for 6 hours. Which one are you going to pick?
No comment.
Yeah. I think one of the things that right, I think we're focusing a lot on what is possible on top of the cloud. But when I think of sort of some of the patterns in cloud native architecture, I think they can be applied to things where, again, more generally, where things aren't fully in your control, um, in where it's on, again, general computing platforms, uh, and it not on the cloud. So, for example, we do a lot of work with medical devices that have mobile apps that are connected to them, whether it's a CGM or a nerve stimulator or something like that, where it's a mobile app that is connected via Bluetooth to a device and also connected to the cloud. Um, and it's BYOD. So it's on a patient's own smartphone. And if you think about that, you are not in charge of when the operating system gets updated. Uh, when they buy a new phone that maybe isn't a phone that you've actually seen before, or it's a combination of those things, right? And so there is somewhat of the, well, we'll test everything ahead of time. But the reality is there are going to be patches of to those operating systems that could happen, security patch, we need it today, and it flows through directly very quickly. Or it could be, again, a new smartphone that they bought. And there are a couple of things you can do. One of them is, yes, test everything, but that's thousands of variants, and you're always going to be behind when you do that. Still something you should do, but the other thing is monitoring what's actually happening and potentially doing things like field level self-validation, right? Oh, I'm connecting via Bluetooth for the first time to my device from this smartphone with this operating system variant. Before I do anything that is medical device related, let me test to make sure all of that is working. That is the kind of thing that on the cloud, that's what's happening underneath the hood and what you can do very easily. You can apply the same thing to that BYOD situation where it does require you to build in field level self validation of functionality into your the operation of your device or your mobile app, and of course getting all that data up into the cloud and saying, okay, if this is not working, then maybe we have a more limited set of features available for that, or you just can't use the device. It's the same principles. You're just applying it to really more generally, when I say cloud native architecture, that would be an abstraction of that you can apply in other areas as well for greater resilience and monitoring and ability to deal with those changes.
Mm. And I think the monitoring is becoming a little more front and center in these scenarios. And the cloud services are giving you much more capabilities these days for active monitoring and detection of problems. Be that, just monitoring your fleet of EC2 instances, CloudWatch, looking for any kind of metrics that are going out of bounds. Looking at you can analyze the traffic coming across your IoT connections. Is there something that is looking a little strange in that traffic these days? Is the kind of deviation from the norm? AI model drift detection, you name it. There's so many tools out there that just monitor your system as a whole and try and detect these anomalies, which may or may not indicate something has changed, something is happening. It may just be real world evolution. But there's a lot more capabilities out there now for that monitoring.
Yeah, and your mitigation strategy has to include uh, getting visibility into what's going on in your medical device, and not only understanding what's going on, because like you said, whether you're in the cloud or bring your own device, like the you're there's a changing ocean underneath you, and so you need to understand how that's impacting your device. And Sam mentioned there are lots of services available, and definitely best practices for having that visibility. And then you have to have a development process where you can do something about what you see, and that is muscle building activity that um, you know as you move to take advantage of the additional features, service integration, mobile app development, cloud native development, the benefits that gets you, you have to build the additional both engineering technical muscle and then cross-functional muscle at the same time, and have a strategy for building that. I do think, I mean, we're kind of we almost are reaching a tipping point where, like, yes, there are new risks and new strategies in medical device development that you have to account for if you're moving to some of these more complex system patterns. But the business strategy, the business risk of not taking those on reaches a tipping point where you won't be able to provide the features that allow you to provide the product you're going to need to provide in 5 years and 10 years. And so there's higher risk on that side of not surviving than the risk at this point in figuring out how to build that muscle within your organization. So it definitely takes technical strategy, takes like corporate strategy, but it's kind of similarly applicable whether you're on the cloud, on a mobile device, building some of that muscle.
Yeah, I'd say one thing, just specifically on the monitoring, as I was thinking through it, right? What I would not neglect as part of that is you can do lots in terms of monitoring your system, but also monitoring user behavior and how your system is behaving for users. So things like product analytics for medical device companies are often neglected, right? And so tools like Pendo, Mixpanel, et cetera, that allows you to see, oh, this is what a user is doing, both for kind of, oh, they're not using it the way we expected it, or oh, here's a use error or a feature that's not really being used, all of those types of things, but also real time seeing, is there a problem somewhere? We're expecting this behavior, but we can see that something is broken, and you can potentially uh, uh, get to diagnosing that issue much more quickly than you could with if you don't have that tooling. So I would say that's one of those things where it's like not really inside the cloud, but those are additional services on top of your mobile apps and your cloud web apps and things like that. I'm like, put that in for monitoring. It really pays itself back really quickly if you do.
Yeah, yeah. Those both as Ian mentioned, provided monitoring services provided by cloud providers and some of those additional vendor services, Mixpanel or Datadog, whoever. I mean, they're super strong and really definitely reduce your risk in being able to move quickly, identify where you need to mitigate, and move quickly.
The business risk part of this that you mentioned, I think that we've been in this industry for a while, right? There are certain areas in the medical device space that have been very digitally forward for a long time, right? Many things where it's where you are doing things outside of a hospital system that is directly, you know, patient facing. Diabetes is an area where, look, that's been we were developing mobile apps connected to devices 15 years ago, right? Like pretty much as soon as the smartphone hit, we were starting to do that, and it's just increased and increased. And it's sort of table stakes. You have to be in a good interoperator, and you have to be have a good digital ecosystem. But there are other areas where it's like 5 years ago, if I look at the surgical suite, it was kind of more moribund as far as that went, right? But nowadays, everyone, and we're working with a lot of folks in that area, sort of, oh no, we have to have a digital ecosystem. We have to connect our robots and the surgical planning software that we bought and a digital implant and all of these things together. And if you don't have that now, you're not really competing. So that's what's happening in the medical device space, not equally across the industry, but it's inevitable. It's hitting everywhere. So that means you have to be more digital, and some folks are going to figure out how to do that faster, more reliably, and those people are more likely to win than folks who are are not doing that. So it's kind of an imperative to be able to move faster, and that's where I think these patterns can be a great tool to help you move faster.
All right. Somehow we're only have a few minutes left, and yet we've only covered a fraction of what we covered in our prep call, which I don't really understand. I'm going to give you guys a choice of two questions to address in our last couple of minutes here. The first one is from friend of Orthogonal, Kurt Hayden, who's out in San Diego. Chemistry question: why is mercury the only metal that is liquid at room temperature? The
I'm
alternative
gonna.
question you could ask is, this has been a great technology discussion. How do you bring your quality organization and your QMS along with all of this change? Since technologists, software people can't just generally will things into a medical device and get them into market.
I'll definitely take the non chemistry question on that one. I mean, maybe I can start on the QMS side and pass off. I think that your engineering organization has to be a good partner with quality and compliance. First and foremost, like your engineering organization needs to understand how to build good, as Ian mentioned earlier, quality software, full stop. Like that's number one. And have to be thoughtful of the requirements, what compliance, regulatory is going to be looking for as outputs, evidence of that software and process that's associated with that software development. I think that having an engineering organization that is understands clearly the importance of that work and is also thinking actively about what can I do to um, uh, automate some of that evidence generation, to think about risk and especially mitigation as I'm thinking about architecture development for the engineered system. And especially, I think there's a difference between a startup organization and a large organization, but especially in a large organization, thinking about the incremental approach to working cooperatively with the regulatory organization and bringing in and piloting new patterns, new tools that will make their job easier rather than just saying, oh, this isn't my problem. I'm going to do minimally and kind of hand off evidence that's partially um, ready to go. So I think taking ownership within the engineering organization of being good thought partners and how to move in the right direction.
And I'm trying to, I guess, trying to formalize that a little more to have this kind of clear distinction between the quality organizations. So there's product quality organizations, be that med device, drug, whatever. There's then IT quality. And unfortunately, we try to conflate both of those. They get mixed up. So you end up with regulatory terminology, that qualification and validation being forced down into your IT organizations, which then means you need to hire IT folks that understand regulations, and really they should be focused on IT engineering quality. So if you can kind of have somebody or part of the organization, separate those two a bit and then have this kind of the Babel fish, the translator between the two. So you can say, okay, we need to qualify this infrastructure, but say that in a way that IT understands. So we need to, have our design. We need to make sure that the deployment happened correctly, that the configuration is happening correctly, that everything's working in that for that infrastructure as expected. Talk to them in IT engineering terms. We deploy the software on top of that stack instead of saying, okay, let's validate it from a farmer perspective. Let's make sure that UAT is tested, that we have traceability between requirements, test cases, and test results. And you can start to extract the normal IT records out of your tooling and create traceability matrices, create design history files. Your engineering team is focused on, you're letting IT do IT. You can now start to use agentic AI and start to generate your design history files or traceability matrices. But I still see, quality organizations firmly anchored in old ways of working from an IT perspective. They want to lock versions forever. They want documents for requirements and designs. It's like, that's not how modern IT works anymore. So you have to have those thought partnerships, those good relationships. You want the kind of the product quality teams stating, this is the control objective we must achieve. Now, IT engineering, you tell me the best way that you can implement that. Usually it's automation, it's taking humans out of the loop, but you have to have that almost separation, but collaboration at the same time.
Yeah. I think there's, yeah, the challenge is how you get that to happen. I have found, um, uh, so ideally the right people that are probably in leadership positions and or in, you know, thought leader within the organization, positions, on both sides of this are should be people that are more problem solvers, right? They have an engineering mindset, whether that they are in the quality organization or they are in the development organization. Um, and so there's a certain I've done this before where I've worked with CTOs who are fresh in from outside of the medical device space getting in, and there is a kind of understanding these different languages, right? And unfortunately, uh, the language regulatory and standards language doesn't make for easy understanding of why. And
Yes.
so at some point, there you want to get those people to develop a mental model of sort of how this should work and why it should work, right? And then if you've got smart problem solvers, uh, you don't need everyone in your organization to be that, but you need enough of them, someone on the quality side, someone on the development side, on the product side, et cetera, to understand enough and form the right mental model. When you have that, you can grow those people or you can hire them. It's harder to hire them because they're not, thick on the ground, shall we say. But I think that's that nexus. Um, and I like hiring like systems engineers with a quality background and a software background. Those people can often be very good bridges. Um, and on the second question, right? It's the reasons are for why Mercury is liquid. There's a few of them, but one of them is relativistic contraction, and then there's because of yeah, the atomic mass, those 80 protons, and then there's weak bonding, right? The low bond energy, and I would not neglect the van der Waals forces as well. But that is a separate webinar when we talk about that. So when we
Thanks.
talk about
Bernhard, that was better
Thanks.
than closing with the AI generated songs I usually do, where I take some keywords from the webinar and come up with like a country music tune. I just human ingenuity still tops AI. That's all I have to say. All right. Well, we are
where do you
actually
think that answer came from, Randy?
oh, I thought you knew.
No. I am not the person that my daughters taking organic chemistry call for a lifeline. So that would be my wife.
Won't you be embarrassed if there was a hallucination in that answer, Bernhard?
Not that embarrassed.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you very much to all of you for joining and your questions. Thank you to our guests, Cab and Ian. Please reach out to us with questions, give us suggestions for the future, and we are all also happy to talk and engage with you. Although Cab has a day job, but
Thank you all.
thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thanks very
Okay.
Cheers.
much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye
Yeah.
bye.
See you.